Welcome to the Three Championship Drive podcast on YouTube, hosted by me, Lance Caporossi. Follow me on X at Lance Caporossi, the same way you see it spelled on the screen. And check out the Three Championship Drive podcast on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and do me a favor. Tell a Pistons fan. So I'm recording this late at night. We got home. Actually, we got home yesterday from a long spring break vacation. It was fun. Had a lot of time in the car while driving to think about what I wanted to talk about on this episode of the Three Championship Drive. So we're just going to get into it. The Ringer dropped their latest NBA draft big board. So I thought it was a good time to talk about some of my favorite prospects. And I'm going to just continue to do this over the course of a few more episodes, just in I won't say leading right up to the draft lottery, but I will be doing more draft stuff as the season progresses. So on this episode, I'm gonna give you three names. I'm just gonna make it very clear. I do not expect the Pistons. There's one guy in the list that I really think would be on their big board. The other two names, I'm bringing them up because I like the fit with what this current roster is. If Even though it's just been a nightmare, but I like those 2 names along with who's already on the team, and I'll explain I'll explain why I like those names, but I'm gonna get into it. So the first name I'm gonna bring up, the first guy, it's Cody Williams. I could see him playing alongside Cade Cunningham for many years. He stands at 6'8", weighing around 180, 190 pounds with a 7-foot wingspan. The things I like about his game, he's a solid ball handler that can finish at the rim with either hand. He's fantastic in transition. He makes smart, quick decisions with the ball when it comes to setting up his teammates. He's solid in the pick and roll. He's not overly athletic, like he's not elite in that area, but he knows how to get to his spots. And once he starts to develop more muscle and really develop into his body, he's going to be able to get to his spots a little bit easier. I really like his game. Now, I know some people would disagree, and that's fine. I just think, going forward, he would be an excellent potential second option alongside Cade Cunningham and another guy that can create plays for other people. And I think even though he's younger than Jaden Ivey, he already has a skill set that you could really build. And I feel like he's more defined in certain areas of his game. And he does things that we wish Jaden Ivey would do, even though he's a little bit younger and hasn't played in the NBA yet. Defensively, he shows a lot of potential. He plays with a lot of effort and hustle, whether it's on the ball, off the ball, or even in help. Like, he has made some great plays this year for Colorado. Like I said already, he's not a great athlete. He does need to add more muscle and weight to his frame, and that will help get him to his shots, get to his spots. His jump shot needs a little work. He did start the season shooting the ball pretty well, I believe. I think around like 40% from three, or maybe even a little higher. You can tell he struggles even as a catch and shoot player and even off the dribble. That's something he's really going to have to develop. Now, his brother Jalen Williams, who plays for the Oklahoma City Thunder, he was a late bloomer as well as a jump shooter, and he has developed quite nicely in that area. And I'm kind of thinking that will be the same thing for Cody Williams. This is a guy that's just honestly he's just a basketball player. He's a hooper, man. Like, it feels like to me, whatever role you put him in, he's going to be fine and he's going to succeed. And plus, I watch Jalen Williams and Gilgis Alexander, and I just get intrigued. And I'm kind of hoping that if the Pistons do go along that route with Cody Williams, they might be able to replicate what those guys are doing in Oklahoma City. I would love to see that. And that is, man, like, I guess like what really draws me to Cody Williams is I watch his brother Jalen, and I'm thinking maybe he's the same player, and that's what really excites me. Now, I don't see the Pistons drafting him with like the first overall pick. I think if they were to draft, I still think Cody Williams could be a top 5 pick. I'm just going to say that. I do think that. So that's why I think he's in play for the Pistons. Now, second on my list, this is a guy the Pistons fans, they will be the most excited about because in this mess of a roster, he somehow fits with his game, and that is Zaccharie Risacher. Hopefully I'm saying his last name right. It is very difficult. So there's a lot to love about his game, and I could see him if the Pistons do draft 1 or 2, I could see him being in play. He just makes a whole lot of sense for the Detroit Pistons. As I said, there's a lot to love about his game. He's one of those projects that's one of those prospects that comes in already with two-way capabilities. Offensively, Risacher is developing into a knockdown shooter, but based on his shooting percentages in in the past, we don't really know if it's the real deal yet. So he's a knockdown shooter. He moves well without the ball, knows how to find his spots, can attack closeouts. He is known as a slasher, and he's very like deceptive when it comes to slashing. And pairing him with Cade, whether he's playing the 3 or the 4, I'm talking about Ricochet, that would be something that could be very intriguing. Like he definitely has the makings of being able to play off the ball alongside Cade Cunningham. He's good in transition. He can score whether he's sprinting down the floor or bringing it up after a defensive rebound or a steal. So I brought up the two-way because defensively, he's pretty solid. He knows where to be on defense. He can read what the offense is trying to do. He's good at defending wings and perimeter players. Like he definitely can contest shots and make things difficult for them. He's also been matched up quite a few times this season with smaller guards and has shown enough where you can feel confident with him switching on to smaller guards in the NBA. I love his potential as a 3 or a 4. Now, he does need to add strength just like Cody Williams. He could be better at finishing around the rim, and he definitely needs to prove that those shooting numbers are the real deal. The other thing that's like I dislike about his game and I want to see more of is I want to see him to be able to create more for himself. He's now one of those guys where you just give him the ball and he's going to go create his own shot. He can create his own shot by moving without it. And he needs a point guard really to set him up. Now that's a part of his game that can grow and he could develop into that. I just don't know if I really see that from him right now. The other thing that I do like about his game is that he can be kind of a glue guy or a connective piece offensively. He's going to make the right play. He's going to, you know, take the open shots. He can play make a little bit for guys. It's just there's a lot to love about Zaccharie Risacher in his game. And plus he's doing it in a good pro league overseas. Like I really like his game. There's just still a few question marks around it when it comes to the shooting. Like if the shooting is the real deal, this is the guy I want the Pistons to draft no matter what. Like I would love his game to be paired with Cade Cunningham and whoever else they decide to bring in this offseason or even trade away. So the third name I'm going to bring up, I honestly don't expect the Pistons to draft this guy unless I don't know, they trade back into the draft, into the lottery, which I don't see them doing. But I'm bringing him up because I like his game. And this is something that even though he struggles offensively, it's the defensive stuff that I like. And this is Donovan Clingan from UConn. He's a 7'2 center with a 7'7 wingspan. And it's the defensive presence the Detroit Pistons desperately need. So offensively, real quick, he is limited to lobs. This is not a guy that you're going to run your offense through. Now he can post up a little bit. He's good at making some passes outside of post ups, but more like really what he is he's going to be a lob threat. I do like his ability to find space in the defense when a guard penetrates. He makes himself available and open for a pass by finding those creases in the defense. He also has very good hands, whether you're throwing the ball up high or you're throwing it down low. He has good hands where he can get that pass and make a play. He's improved as a roll man, and you can even see him sprinting in transition at that size. Like he's an interesting player. Like even though he's limited offensively, he doesn't shoot much out of the paint. Just to have that solid of hands and being able to dunk everything down. We've already seen Cade elevate bigs when he plays with them. Like he made Marvin Bagley look good. He's made James Wiseman look good. Jalen Duren, he looks good playing next alongside Cade. The only thing those three have in common, which is different than Donovan, is they're not that good defensively. He is very good defensively. So speaking of the D, he has potential to be an excellent drop defender because of his mobility. He's smart defensively, doesn't commit many fouls. I think he's averaging around like 2 blocks per game, but I think it's just around 4 per 40 in college. Does not commit many fouls, goes straight up, can use that ability, that strength. Like that's where you get some of those touch fouls, which I think having the body he has in the NBA, he'll probably get away with it a little bit more. He's so good defensively. And that is something that he's like light years ahead of Jalen Duren. Even though I don't think he's a guy that's on the Pistons radar, this is a dude that I really do hope they take a look at, especially if they slip in the draft. Like if they're drafting around 5 or 6, and I don't know, depends on how it all plays out. They'll probably end up with like at worst with the 5th pick. But if they do slip to 5 and like Cody Williams is off the board and Risacher is off the board, like the other 2 guys that I've mentioned, I would not mind them taking a look at Donovan Clingan out of UConn. So he's a bad free throw shooter, so he could be a liability late in games. I've already said earlier, not much of an offensive game. Doesn't he lacks post moves, really doesn't have anything outside of the paint. Um, I did talk him up defensively, but he does have slow feet when asked to guard out to the perimeter. And that might be something where NBA teams try to pull him out of the paint and really test him on the perimeter. And we'll see how he does eventually when he gets to that level. But at the potential as a drop center and being able to protect the rim, yeah, I love his ability to be able to do those things at the next level. Like he is, again, I don't know if the Pistons will actually be serious about him, but like his defensive chops, that is something I want from the 5, especially if like Jalen Duren's offensive game is really just limited to catching and finishing, because that's something Donovan can do as well. But he just brings another level defensively that the Pistons have not had in quite some time. So, this next topic, this is an interesting one for me because I don't it's fun looking back, but it's a little painful when we look back, especially with like how this rebuild has been going. And yeah, I'm talking about Jerami Grant. Pistons should have kept him. I don't, I mean, again, it's hard to look back and you don't know how, if like, how the roster would have been different if they had kept Jerami Grant. But I think it would have been a much better product than what we're watching on the floor right now. So November 22 of 2020, Jerami Grant signed a 3-year, $60 million contract with the Detroit Pistons. It was a sign and trade with the Denver Nuggets. The Nuggets were willing to match, but gave him what he ultimately wanted, which was a chance to be the guy and grow his game. So this might be the biggest fumble by Troy Weaver since he became the Detroit Pistons GM. Jerami Grant was one of the few free agents willing to leave a good situation for a chance to grow his game and evolve into the player he believed he could become. So looking back on those 2 seasons, the Detroit Pistons had a guy who wanted to be here. He was embraced by the city. He got a mural super early into his tenure into Detroit. It was a beautiful mural as well. He evolved into a 3-level scorer. He could hit the 3, he could attack you mid-range, he could hurt you in isolations, and he could finish at the rim. And he didn't lose his ability to move without the ball. We saw that late in Cade's rookie year that Jerami Grant started going back to moving around the perimeter and relocating and hitting shots that way. Now, there were some moments where he looked Cade off, but again, that is fine. Cade was in his rookie year. We didn't need all of the pressure on him at that moment. And it has become incredibly difficult for the Pistons to replace Jerami Grant. And he really is the 3-4 you want to pair with Cade Cunningham. He would be the perfect complement to Cade Cunningham right now. So it would have been beneficial short term and long term to keep him. Short term, the Pistons had a guy who could be a leader on offense while Cade figured the NBA out. And eventually, Jerami Grant would have passed the torch over to Cade, which would have led Jerami Grant to becoming a secondary option. And as a secondary option, like a guy that could hit shots from all over the floor, someone that you could count in the fourth quarter, but he also would have never lost that defensive ability that he still displays to this day, that versatility. Now, I don't know if you keep Jerami Grant and you still draft Jaden Ivey or you bring in Duran. I mean, I think Jerami Grant was that trading him was the reason we did get Jalen Duran. I might be mixing up the how all that all happened, but I believe Jerami Grant being traded helped bring in Jalen Duran, which, dude, I mean, if you got to lose out on one of those guys, that's totally fine for me. I'd rather be watching a better product on the floor than what we're watching right now. So Jerami Grant's work ethic and commitment to improvement could have served as a motivating force for younger players. He could have helped instill a winning culture, not to mention having a veteran like Grant could have helped the development of some of the young guys by not forcing them into roles they weren't ready for. Like, it feels like during Troy Weaver's tenure, a lot of these young guys have just been forced into difficult spots where they're just not ready to handle the role. And plus, they don't have anybody challenging them for those positions out on the floor. And Jerami Grant, he would have been there. Like, building a team focused around young players is difficult. That's why a team needs veterans that have had success in the NBA to teach these young guys. And Jerami Grant really could have been one of these veterans who's only 26, 27. He could have been here through the whole rebuild and ultimately helped lead the Pistons to success. Again, I hate looking back on all of it. But the other day, like when we were on vacation, I was catching some of the Pistons game and they were just getting blown out. It looked miserable. I can't believe I had actually turned on the game. And it made me think like, dude, I wish we didn't have this many young players on the team. Like it's incredibly frustrating to watch what they're doing. And again, it's no offense to any of these players, but I go back to thinking about Jerami Grant and his 20 points per game and his 43 points that he had against the Chicago Bulls. It was a lot of fun. And then thinking of the potential of between him and Cade Cunningham running a two-man game, and it just would be so much more fun to watch Jerami Grant with the Detroit Pistons. And I don't know if there's a chance to bring him back. I know his contract is just absolutely insane. Right now, I believe it's 5 years, 162 million, and I think he's going to get paid around 36 million in his final year of that contract, which is a player option, and he'll be 33 years old. But I just feel like his game, when it's not, you know, it doesn't really depend on how athletic he is. Like, he does definitely has some skill to his game. He would have been the perfect player just to grow alongside Cade Cunningham. It would have given the Pistons a foundation. You would have been able to bring along these young guys much more slowly. And I don't know, it just upsets me a little bit with what we're watching. And again, I've already said it. I think Troy really fumbled by trading away Jerami Grant. And I just think he was so focused and determined to build a team his own way, he lost sight of the short term and the long term success that Jerami Grant could have provided the Detroit Pistons. So I'm going to keep it on Troy Weaver. We all know he has done a terrible job as the Detroit Pistons GM. Yes, he has drafted talented players near the top of the draft, like Cade, like Jaden, like Asar, Jalen Duren, but their fit together has been awkward. Yes, he can identify talent, but all of the pieces, for some reason, when he drafts, they just don't really fit together. And I think it's just because Troy Weaver has been drafting and looking for like that golden ticket, that one player where he's like, yeah, I found this guy and he's going to turn my fortunes around. I feel like he was just doing that without any clue on how to fit all these pieces together. So the contracts he has given out, they've been questionable. Some of the trades have been questionable. We just talked about Jerami Grant. His record as a GM of the Detroit Pistons is 72 and 237. So why haven't we heard anything from the national media when it comes to his job? The lack of attention given to Troy Weaver and in the job he has done as the Detroit Pistons GM by the national media is a little surprising. So I started thinking about this, like maybe the national media has been quiet because the Detroit Pistons are in the middle of a rebuild, even though if you ask me, we're in year one of the rebuild because the first few years have been so bad. I don't think you can't build on any of that. And the media tends to like they really do tend to focus on like playoff and championship contenders, playoff races. They're always looking for headline grabbing stories. They're always trying to compare LeBron James and, like, what did he eat for breakfast? What did he have for dinner? Does it make sense? How can you eat those two meals? And how do you have success on the floor? It's just they talk about everything else except for a team that has been struggling for years. And there's a few good stories surrounding the owner of the Detroit Pistons that if you really wanted to look into it, you could bring those up on those shows and you could have a conversation about what's going on with him and some of his business practices, but I'm not going to get into that. Unless your name is Sam Hinkie, a rebuild really isn't that interesting for the national media. So unlike Sam Hinkie, I guess you could say Troy Weaver has made moves that look like he's trying to steer the organization in the right direction, like signing Jerami Grant, trading for Boyan, bringing in Mason Plumlee, Alec Burks. He's been willing to take on young players that have had a rough start to their career and give them a home. But overall, like I've already mentioned, this dude has only won 72 games as the GM. The Pistons are fielding a roster of they've had 30 players playing for them this year. Every year it has gone up. They've had so many G League guys, so many guys that have not given chances by other teams. I think, some of the guys they've traded away, it's like excluding Boyan and Alec Burke, it's like Marvin Bagley, Isaiah Livers, Monte Morris, Mike Muscala, Danilo Gallinari, all these guys that they've acquired over the years, they haven't even played, I think, a total of 900 minutes combined for other NBA teams. It's been bad. And there's nothing. We had Kendrick Perkins go off on Monty Williams the other day because he made some comments about Dante DiVincenzo when he had a record-setting night and had a career high against the Pistons. Yeah, we hear about that, but like for some reason, Troy Weaver has been able to just like hide and not be talked about. He has not been criticized by the national media, and it's been painful because I feel like they could really elicit some change in Detroit. I'm waiting for the day the NBA steps in and just says, look, we got to do something because nothing is working in Detroit. Troy Weaver has done a bad job. And I know some fans will point to, like, well, look, he drafted Cade Cunningham. He drafted Jaden Ivey. He drafted Asar. He brought in Jalen Duren. Look at Isaiah Stewart. Okay, but he also traded Sadiq Bey for James Wiseman, where at the time I didn't hate the trade because I thought, okay, you're giving a chance for a 7'1" center who really hasn't had an opportunity in Golden State. You might be giving him a fresh start. He has a ton of potential. I get it. That dude, that's not terrible. But when it comes to the draft, it's like, yeah, dude, Cade was a no-brainer. Like, I think Jaden Ivey at 5, yeah, he's a top 5 talent, but like if Cade really was your franchise guy, you maybe could have avoided best player available and started drafting for fit and tried to build a real roster around Cade where you could finally start to have some success. And even though Jalen Duren has been good for the Detroit Pistons, we've seen some 2020 games from him. It really hasn't turned to wins. And like what you gave up to get him, it's what I'm saying? Like, only time will tell if it was worth it when there are other centers in the NBA that can provide what he provides, but also give you something defensively. And then you look at the Isaiah Stewart trade, and it's like you haven't been able to do anything with the first round pick you traded away because you put so many protections on it. Was it worth it to do all of that to bring in Isaiah Stewart when if you look back on that draft, you probably could have got him even towards the end of the first round and wouldn't have had to give up so much. And then, even I don't know if it's Troy Weaver, but like then the coach you bring in and how much money you give him, it's just been a disaster. And I just wonder why Troy Weaver has been given a pass when he hasn't reached 73 wins. And it doesn't look like he's going to get to 80 even at the end of this year. And you already see fans saying, you know what? I know he's going to be back, but he doesn't deserve to be back. And I really do feel like if the national media steps in and says something and puts a spotlight on Detroit in the job he has done, we might actually see some real change. Maybe the NBA will be forced to step in and, you know, do something. Maybe they'll light a fire under Tom Gordon and say, dude, you need to eat some of these contracts and just say, wash your hands of it and bring in some guys that can really help turn this thing around because you got a bunch of young players and right now their careers look like they're going nowhere in Detroit. Thank you guys for listening to the 3 Championship Drive podcast. Do me a favor, go to Google, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe. After you subscribe, leave a review, drop a rating, but more importantly, tell a Pistons fan